So we will call our meeting to order at 6:37 p.m. Eastern. Roll call time.
Yep. Jessica?
Here.
Ernest?
Here.
Jeanette is not here. Mary?
Here.
Wolfgang?
Here.
Catherine?
Here.
Suzanne?
Here.
Andy is not here. And Lindo?
Here.
So you have quorum.
Yay.
Okay.
I was worried about that on the way
Yeah.
here. All right, we're gonna recite our mission all at once. Act as a strong advocate to justice and equal opportunity by providing citywide leadership and guidance in the area of civil rights. Now we will have an opportunity for public comment. If you are virtual and having difficulty connecting, you can call 434-970-3117. The commission welcomes comments and questions and commits to listening carefully and thoughtfully to what is presented. A maximum of 16 public comment time slots are allotted per meeting. Each speaker will have 3 minutes to speak. The commission requests that members of the public refrain from engaging in personal attacks against commissioners and staff members and asks that comments and questions focus on matters related to human rights within the city. Do we have any? Yep.
One note, it's 3115, not 3117.
Oh, sorry.
That's the extension, just to make sure.
Sorry. Do we have anyone online?
We currently have no attendees.
Okay. And that's that. All right, we're gonna go just to approving two regular minutes, our regular meeting minutes from last meeting.
All right. Any corrections proposed for those, or are we set for a vote? Ready for a vote? Okay. Jessica?
Yes.
Ernest?
Abstain.
And Mary?
Yes.
Wolfgang?
Yes.
Catherine?
Yes.
Suzanne?
Abstain.
Andy's not here. Lindo?
Yes.
Yep.
All right, and now we have a special presentation from Captain Mark Van Meter. Welcome.
Mr. Van Meter, you need to unmute your microphone.
It's the simple things, isn't it?
There he
Hi.
is. Right.
Are you able to hear me now?
Yes, we hear
Yes.
you and see you.
Very good. Thank you so much. I appreciate the offer to come and speak to the Human Rights Commission. I am in Fredericksburg right now. My wife and I are on staff with the Salvation Army Camp for Children in this area. We have about 300 kids that are at camp with us, and so I slipped away for a few minutes. The one thing I have learned this week is that I am getting too old to go to camp, so that is the reality. I wanted to share for a few minutes about the Salvation Army project and just give you some information on where we are headed with a potential building campaign. About 10 years ago, there was conversation that started that our current facility on Ridge Street was getting outdated, becoming too small for our services. And so conversations started, and those conversations are always somewhat grassroots, and it began to eventually build into a formal proposal to the Salvation Army. Last year, we served over 21,000 people through services at the Salvation Army. That included emergency assistance, utilities, food baskets, meals, clothing, Christmas assistance, and other critical services that we provide on a regular basis. Of note, our feeding kitchen on Ridge Street served approximately 60,000 total meals out of our kitchen. So there was a lot of conversation about how do we prepare ourselves for future growth in the Charlottesville area, but also in just the expansion of services that the Salvation Army will provide in coming years. So the Salvation Army's Administration and Advisory Board commissioned a comprehensive study a need study, if you will, on what services needed to be provided in the community for a future building. And it was determined at that point that the current building is too small, the capacity is too small, the age of the building is outdating our ability to effectively serve. And so the Salvation Army has launched a $22 million community capital fundraising project. It's really not a wish list per se, but it is a master plan of how we can position ourselves to become a primary provider for social service needs in our community. So let me show you, if I can, see if we can switch here, just a couple pictures, and I'll show you what that building is going to look like. Let me see if I can do this.
Wow, pretty.
Okay, can you see that? Are you able to see the picture?
Yes, yes, we see it.
Okay, very good. Okay, so this is the rear of the building. It is 4th Street, and it will become one of the primary entrances for services for people coming in. You will note that as you look at the picture on the right side where the single car is, that is currently our shelter building. Our plan is during the construction phase that the primary building, which consists of 2 major structures, the multipurpose room, chapel, the old social service offices, and then the kitchen administrative building, that will be raised, and the construction will go on the property. The clients, our guests that are currently in our shelter, will remain, and they will stay on the property. Once this building has been completed, they will then move into the building, and we will commence with demoing the shelter building and then finishing out the parking lot for the completion of the project. This is the aerial shot, so you will note that the fire department is on the right side and Nolan's is on the left side. That is how the structure will appear from an aerial perspective. This is from Ridge Street in Monticello. The building has been designed to really set nicely in the current how buildings are being built in that area. Attractive, using natural colors as much as possible, as open and airy as possible. And you will note that there is a large black oak tree on the property right now, and the decision has been to preserve that tree, and it will remain on property, and we're doing everything possible to protect that tree. And then this will be the look of the building as you're coming across the bridge, past the fire department on the right side. So that's a good idea of what the facility is going to look like. And we're looking forward to having this building represent the Salvation Army, but I think also enhance just the this particular neighborhood. So a couple primary things about the building. The chapel / auditorium will not really grow out any larger capacity. It will remain about 100 seats. The emergency shelter will go from what is currently 58 beds to 114 beds. So almost doubling the capacity of the emergency shelter. Our soup kitchen currently seats between 70 and 80 individuals, and we are expanding the seating to 120 seats. And then the transitional housing, currently there are 9 apartments on the property. It is being reduced to 7 transitional apartments, but we are not losing bed capacity at all in that transition. Obviously, additional offices will be included, and then we're also expanding out our multi-purpose room by an additional 500 square feet. additional classrooms, and then just a small increase in parking. So this is kind of a sliced view. It's kind of hard to see this, but this is the first level of the building. On your far right, as you're looking at the picture, would be Ridge Street. Coming in, you'll notice the cafe area, the dining area on the bottom left. And then above that are the administrative offices, the shelter administration, social service administration, various conference rooms, meeting rooms, so we can meet with our clients as needed. And then in the back is a multi-purpose room. The second floor, and I apologize, I didn't get pictures of these put up, but the second floor is the administrative offices. Third floor, I believe, is the women's dorm, and the fourth floor is the men's dorm. And they do include various small apartments for the clients if we have small families coming in. And it's just going to be a nice looking building. And I'm looking forward to leading the charge on getting this property built and established for the Salvation Army. I will tell you, my wife and I arrived just a month ago in Charlottesville, and we're really excited with how the program is already being built out, the support behind the project, and looking forward to getting this building breaking ground potentially late next spring, early summer. And then it'll take approximately 20 months to complete the entire project. So with that, I'd be more than happy to answer any questions and let you just kind of explore what this is gonna look like for our communities.
Thank you, Captain Van Martin Meter for presenting to us, and we have a commissioner with a question.
Hi, thank you. First I want to say I appreciate your commitment to serving the community, and I want to ask specifically about that a little bit.
Adele, make sure.
Did you hear any of mine? He probably did, but it's, I want to make sure
Okay.
we're recording.
Okay. So I'm specifically interested in how the Salvation Army, what is your commitment to including and welcoming all members of the community, making sure that there's equitable access to your services, specifically LGBTQIA clients? If you could talk about that, what commitment you have to that and how that will be clear to the community?
You're muted again, Mr. Van Meter.
I apologize for that. You would have enjoyed what I just said. The Salvation Army's mission.
Your screen so we can see you, please. Sorry, thank you. Oh, there you go.
There we go.
Hi.
All right, apologize for that. The Salvation Army's mission statement clearly says that our services are provided to all individuals, regardless of sexual orientation, gender, religious background. So currently, we have a dedicated room in our shelter area for LGBTQ, and our plan is to have a dedicated room area for LGBTQ in the subsequent building, the new construction as well. So it's already in mind. It's something that we're going to make sure is in place. We want to make sure that this building services all individuals regardless of where they're at in life, and we just want to be available to them.
Yes, Mary.
Yeah, I have a follow-up question, and I do say I think there's such a need for additional services in this town, and so welcome that, and it really looks beautiful. But just to follow up that last question, is the Salvation Army committed to treating gay families on the same terms as other families? That is, will they be allowed to stay together? Because I know that had been an issue. My information's old, so that you all may have rectified that a long time ago, but I know that historically that has been an issue, that gay families were more likely to be separated at the shelter, and I'm wondering if you could speak to that a little.
Yeah, I mean, there's been no discussion to change what we currently provide, and that is equal access to all sexual orientations to our services. When you go into the primary portions, say, of the men's shelter or the women's shelter, the access into those has a barrier door that allows individuals to be in the apartments. So we could, if it was required, put men, if you will, on the women's floor because of that barrier door, and vice versa. So the intention is to provide services to all individuals, regardless of their sexual orientation. So we will work it out, make it work, and provide these services that the community wants us to provide.
So, I'm sorry, I don't want to be difficult, and I really do welcome the idea that we would be significantly expanding the beds available to unhoused people, but I wasn't sure if I understood that to say that lesbian and gay families with kids would be allowed to stay together, and is that the current policy of the Salvation Army? Because as the Human Rights Commission, we obviously care that, we want more beds, but we want to see a very clear commitment to non-discrimination. So I'm sorry, that's why I kind of wanted to follow up there.
Sure. So that I'm very clear. Yes, we will provide opportunities for families of any sexual orientation to stay together if that is what their need is.
Thank you.
Can Catherine go?
Oh, yes, I'm sorry.
It's on.
Okay. Thank you very much. I echo everyone's support of expanding the beds, and that is a really beautiful building. So that's fabulous. I have a question about what you just said, and then I have a second question. My first question is about, you said there would be a room for gay, lesbian, trans folks, and I'm not quite sure what you meant by a room. Can you talk more about that?
Right. So if they came in as a family, we would provide one of our transitional apartments for them if they're in our transitional program. So that is without any question or doubt. If an individual came in and simply stated that they are homosexual or lesbian, then we ask them how they identify, and if they identify the alternate gender, then we discuss with them security. If you are a biological female identifying as a male, then there are security issues, but we again have the transitional apartments available that we can secure for them if they are available, for housing.
Okay, so you were talking about transgender individuals having a space where they feel safe. When you talk about security, I'm wondering, are you talking about their sense of security for their own person?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
And then my second question is, I'm wondering if you can walk us through what people need to do to access your services and remain, I guess, in good standing at the Salvation Army, and then what of those policies, if any, because I don't really know how this works, are kind of Salvation Army as an organization that impose them, and which policies are local and subject to being changed?
Well, all of our policies are filtered through our social service departments in both our divisional level and our territorial level. Our divisional level is in DC, and our territorial level is in Atlanta. So we try to adhere to national policies that the Army states or in states for our shelter programs. There are obviously variances. One of the things that we are moving towards with our current shelter, and let me create a scenario for you. We have an individual who has been in our shelter for 14 months. There's no reason for them to be in our shelter for 14 months. At some point, someone should have sat down with them, had a case conferencing, began doing case management with them, and set goals for them so that they could quickly get out of our shelter. An individual who is in our shelter for 14 months is taking up a bed from someone else that we can't get in to assist either. So we are beginning a much more extensive case conferencing, case management, working with the clients, setting goals, helping them obtain their financial base, whether that's SSDI or helping them find a job, reconnecting them with family if they want that, helping them obtain their various documents, social security cards, birth certificates, so they can get a job. But no longer are they going to be allowed to come and flop in our shelters. We want to be a crutch for individuals to help them along. We do not want to be a gurney so that they can just come and take up space and not move forward in their lives.
Thank you very much for that. I would imagine that rather than flopping, they're living and having trouble finding. I mean, it's expensive. There's not a lot of housing.
Well, that's not the
in this area.
case. A lot of the individuals come and they do not follow through with getting their goals established and moving forward. A lot of that is on us. It's our responsibility to hold people accountable. But we're talking about space, we're talking about financial resources, and it really is dignity of life for them as well to help them be able to move forward and become productive. Now, obviously, we deal with mental health issues and some physical illnesses and things, but those are extenuating circumstances. And even with those, there are other resources, not simply coming into a shelter and remaining there for over a year, moving into a year and a half.
Yeah, no, I understand that, and I appreciate the overview of the kinds of services you have. My question was actually a little bit more on the front end. When people come in, what kind of screening is there? What requirements do they have to meet in order to use your services? What kinds of activities do they need to engage in early on in order to stay in the shelter? That's what I was looking for.
Right. So currently, if an individual wants to come into our shelter, we just simply have to have an available bed. What we are moving towards, and it probably will not be fully established until after the construction is completed, that individuals will come in most likely on a 21-day, 28-day emergency shelter status. And during that time, they have to begin meeting with our casework staff, begin setting their goals and showing that they are moving forward with their goals. So at this point right now, it's bed availability. But in the coming years, our plan is to begin moving people through a plan to get them on their feet and help them to be productive individuals in our community.
So there's no other screening, they just need a bed and you have a bed and that's the end of it? I'm trying to understand.
Sure. I'm not trying to be elusive at all. We do occasional drug testing, alcohol testing. We are not a security-minded facility in that my staff can handle people that are abusive or that there are extreme medical needs. And so, the individuals are assessed as they come in. If they come in and there's alcohol on their breath, but they are still cordial and able to work with us, then there's no reason that they cannot stay in our shelter. But if an individual comes in abusive, then they're not able to stay in the shelter, because that not only affects the staff, but it also affects the life of the other individuals in the shelter, many of whom are out trying to get jobs, trying to work their way forward. But when they try to go to bed at 9 o'clock at night and an individual comes in and they are coming off of a drug trip or something, and they have to wrestle, emotionally with an individual that's in the shelter, that affects them from being able to get sound sleep, getting up early, going to their jobs, that kind of thing. So it's a balance of being almost a low barrier shelter and a higher barrier shelter.
So a medium barrier shelter.
If you want to call it that.
Get a follow-up.
All right, any questions?
Go ahead, I got some. Go ahead.
Let me say this, if I could, real quick. So my wife and I moved here from the Panhandle of West Virginia. When we got to our previous appointment, we had a 36-bed shelter, and it was full. And I had people who were living in the shelter over a year and a half. I mean, put calendars on the wall, rugs on the floor. And we began this process of bringing the individuals in for case conferencing, case management, working with them, accountability. And in 3 years' time, we saw over 200 individuals leave homelessness and obtain permanent housing and financial security in our community. So this is going to be a very effective and proven model that we're going to try to establish here at the Salvation Army in Charlottesville.
Question about that. What was the economic makeup of that area that you were in?
I mean, that's a very good question. The Panhandle of West Virginia is old coal mine communities, some oil, and a very depressed area. Housing was much cheaper in that area. So we recognize that we're in an area where housing is much more expensive here. So, you know, our team is committed to working with individuals to try to help them find housing. Simply because a family or an individual here in the Charlottesville area has not found housing doesn't mean that they are not working on their goals. The goal could be that you are putting in, you know, 4 applications for housing this month or 6 applications. Denial is not necessarily a failure of the goal. It just means that we are continuing to work through their hurdles.
And I agree with that. And that's kind of where I was kind of headed with that as well, is
Sure.
how hard it is for people who are not homeless to find regular housing. And you put
Correct.
that barrier of being homeless and everything else going on for them to try to find affordable housing in Charlottesville. So my hat is off to you to find someone to connect with or organizations to connect with that people can find affordable housing.
Sure. And so I want to be real clear. I am bringing in a policy, and it's up to my team to work out the details. And if they need to come back to me and say, you know, your policy says this, but here's what we need for the steps to reach the policy, that is perfectly acceptable for us to work through. But we have to recognize on a regular basis, we have individuals who come knocking on our door and we have to turn them away from housing because we have individuals who are not being held accountable to trying to obtain permanent housing. Now, in truth, one of the hurdles could be your financial state, where you're at financially, does not allow you to live in Charlottesville. So we need to look at some of these other smaller communities. What does that mean? How do you get around? Those kind of things. But, you know, a potential hurdle could just simply be you can't afford to live here. And that is unfortunate, but that is a reality that we have to look at as well.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Sorry.
So I want to thank you again for coming here and for answering our questions. I realize that some of them could be a bit challenging. And I just want to go back for a moment to concerns about equitable access for members of the LGBTQIA community. I feel like there may be some learning and some communication and some training that might be helpful, because this is going to be, you know, I hear that you've only been here for a month. There is a very large, very open, very active LGBTQ community in Charlottesville, and I would encourage you to reach out to learn more about what issues you might, you know, your staff might cause, because this has been a long-standing thing in Charlottesville, you know. I've heard concerns about treatment at the Salvation Army, and I don't want to go back in history, but I'd like to offer and suggest that there may be some learning that your organization in Charlottesville could do. about how to be fully inclusive and welcoming. And I think there are plenty of places where you can learn to do that, and I'd be happy to help you find that. But I do worry about that.
One thing that we are looking at doing in the immediate future, I have put in our new budget a social service director. So it'll be somebody that will oversee all of our social services for the Salvation Army. That is our feeding kitchen, our social services to the community, also our sheltering. So I will happily make that a priority for that individual as soon as we can get them on staff, that they engage with the LGBTQ community so that we can hear. And we need to know where we are being successful, but also where our shortcomings are. Thank you, I appreciate that.
Thank you.
It's a bit of a pivot, so if you want to stay on that topic.
Did you have something? Can you wait for commissioners?
So I appreciate your answer, and again, I appreciate your willingness to answer all of these questions just a month into your job. But I was concerned about one thing you said about the treatment of transgender individuals being placed in an apartment if it's available. And so I guess my question is, if an apartment is not available, is a transgender woman going to be housed with women, being allowed to use the restroom for women? Is there a clear policy about that, about how transgender individuals are treated and where they are housed?
That's a great question. We've had a lot of discussion about that, and we basically follow federal and state laws pertaining to that. And so I will dialogue more with our headquarters, but I think we have to, again, engage with each individual per their needs.
Would you be willing to commit to getting back to us with an answer about that question? Because I don't know how the other commissioners feel. I desperately believe we need more housing, but I would not support expansion of housing that is provided on a discriminatory basis. And so I would just want to know more, and I don't mean to put you on the spot in kind of your early days, but knowing that transgender women are going to be treated as women and transgender men will be treated as men is incredibly important to me, and my guess is other commissioners as well. So if that's something you could follow up with us about, I think that would be very appreciated.
Sure.
Thanks.
Yep, I absolutely will. Can I send that response to Victoria? And I apologize, I didn't catch which one is Victoria in the group.
Or you can send it to the Human Rights Commission. We have an email address that you could send.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, so this is Jessica Harris, the chair. I just wanted to say that thank you for being here today. I know we're asking you a lot of very pointed questions, and I appreciate your level of expertise in bringing a model that you have found successful in other areas. I think language really matters, and I don't know the situation of the individual that you're referring to as flat. Like, I personally, like, that sits with me really heavily as we've been in this community, and our Human Rights Commission has literally taken on this year housing. Just to be mindful, like, there are very special circumstances here in Charlottesville that make housing really hard, and I'm speaking as chair, but as my individual self, I don't know if others felt that too, but just saying that someone flopped just doesn't sit well with me. Like, I don't know the circumstances, I don't know the situations, I'm just saying there's a lot of circumstances and challenges that we've seen in the city that people are having, and just saying that you're gonna put them on a plan to get them out the door just doesn't sit well with me and my own being, just as we're caring about this community that you're coming into. I have lots of other questions, but I want other commissioners. But I just wanted to say that it's not an attack to you. I really, really appreciate you coming here and being open. You are in a very challenging position because you've just been here for 3 weeks. But I just wanted to share that as we've taken up this challenge as our Human Rights Commission. We focused on many things in the years past, but we've really decided that this year we're going to focus on housing. So I just wanted to say that.
I want to make sure I understand you correctly. You find it you find it offensive or concerning that we are trying to move people out of a shelter?
I'm not concerned that you're trying to move people out. I understand the success rate of setting goals. It's concerning when you say that someone's just flopped and sitting there.
Oh, well, I think when somebody comes into an emergency shelter and they are there, well over a year, and they have not shown any progress in trying to get their financials secured, that is basically, you're using us as a free motel. And it's not appropriate when we have donor dollars, when we have grants, when we have other people who need those beds as well. And so, we don't want to judge people based simply on their inability to obtain permanent housing or financials, but they do need to show that they are attempting to move forward. There's no question that some individuals will take longer, and that's not the issue. The issue is when they come into their case conferencing and they have obviously demonstrated that they are not working on any of their goals, then that becomes our concern. I'll give you an example. So my wife and I try to eat lunch with our guests daily as we were able. And I had a gentleman just last week who came to me and asked if I could somehow bypass the system, my team, and get him into housing. And my shelter manager came to me and said, we simply do not have a bed. And I said, where is he going to sleep tonight? And she said, I have no idea, but we do not have a bed to put him in. Well, and then, I hear that we have individuals who've been in our shelter 14 months or so. And that causes me concern.
I appreciate your concern. I just wanted to reflect my concern to you, and it wasn't about people not doing their part. It's just the language. Maybe it was a poor choice of a first example. Did you have something?
I have a pivot,
That's
I
fine.
suppose.
Okay.
All right. I have a question about the way that the shelter is designed and the way the number of beds were selected. Is the number of beds selected based on your sense of how the Salvation Army can meet current demand, future demand? And are there any limitations currently imposed by the way that the property is designed for future expansion?
There's a small area of the property for future expansion, but I doubt that we would be able to get additional beds on that facility. In an emergency situation, we would be able to use our multipurpose room for additional beds, but the transitional housing, the apartments will be pretty established once the building is built.
Thank you.
It's simply a design element, and we do have an option if needed, if the money was there to build upward and put additional beds in, but to go towards 4th Street or Ridge Street, it's just not going to be an option because of landlocked.
Hi, Captain. My name is Courtney Brown. I'm part of the Equity and Inclusion Office for the City of Charlottesville.
Yes.
Welcome to Charlottesville, and hopefully to see you and your wife soon.
Thank you.
I just had a conversation with some people yesterday, including at the Police Commission. So with the 21 to 28 day stay, do you have any effective, solution that involves other organizations? The population that I work with are usually homeless, formerly incarcerated, and I feel like our streets are going to be flooded with more demands, more people sleeping on the street, more families. Do we have a plan so people can kind of work together as far as organizations to help ease that 21 to 28 day stay? I just feel like, we're all going to get hit really hard. It's pretty much almost impossible to find certain people housing here. So I'm just wondering, do you guys have a plan for that yet? Or is there a way we can combine our services to make that 28 days seem like 3 months, but not as much?
Right. I appreciate your question, and thank you so much for your service to the community as well. You and me, we do not have easy jobs,
Yeah.
and so I appreciate your work as well.
Thank you.
Let me be clear, the 21 days is not an arbitrary date that we will just kick people out. What it does is we bring individuals in and we say, in the next 21 days, we would like to see you begin to work towards these goals. What are the goals? Well, that has to be settled between the individual and the caseworker. It might just simply be that they begin attending AA or NA meetings, that they, apply for their birth certificates. So at the end of those 21 days, we can bring an individual in and say, what have you accomplished? What are you working towards? Well, I've applied for my birth certificate. Great, then you've met one of your goals, and we can attach another 21 days to their stay. But so it's not simply that you're in for 21 days, you're out. It sets a date for us to bring individuals back in to speak to them about how they are moving forward. So our goal is not to put people back out on the streets. God forbid. That's not why we're building this building. We want to help people move forward in life. And I would also suggest this. I'll be back in town next week. If you would mind reaching out to me at my office, I would love to talk to you and see how we can engage with you a little bit more. And I will also tell the commissioners this. One of the reasons why I have felt that it is important for us to have a social service director on staff is so that we can begin to engage more effectively with the other community groups around the area. Our partnerships are very important to us, and we have probably neglected some of those handshake partnerships in the community, and we can better ourselves by getting more engaged with the community groups.
Sorry, I wanted to switch to just another topic, and I wonder
Sure.
if you could talk a little bit about how you serve non-English speakers, and also whether you have a policy with regard to immigration status for people who get services there.
Sure. So again, we have some areas that we need to be better at, and part of that simply is having bilingual staff in place. Currently, we have a family, in fact, I think we have two, last I heard, families from Mexico who have come in, and they ended up in Charlottesville. Fortunately, I have an individual who attends our church who speaks Spanish, and we also have a gentleman that is staying in the shelter that speaks Spanish. So we've been able to really work with that family through these individuals. But we need to have bilingual people on staff to help engage with these people. Immigration status, again, we will provide the emergency lodging to them. And we try to do background checks as much as possible for sex offenders and violent offenders. So our hope is that we are still able to do some kind of background check to assure the safety and security of children and individuals in our shelter.
And just to be clear, does that mean that you do accept undocumented individuals to stay in the shelter? Is that just on an emergency basis or on the same basis as other people are treated?
Well, there's no difference in how we treat people. So yes, we currently have undocumented.
You said that people could come on an emergency basis, so I wasn't clear if you were making a distinction or if I was reading that into it.
Yeah. No, I mean, again, we sit with these individuals, undocumented folks, and work with them on their goals. What do you need in order to be able to move forward? And so if one of their goals is to meet with immigration services or naturalization services, then that is a goal that we will start working with them on and try to help them establish themselves in the community. So yes, currently, I know that we have one family, and I believe that we have two families that are undocumented and staying in our shelter right now.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Hi, Captain. Thank you for being here. I
Sure.
was hoping to ask a little bit about, like I will say through my role doing outreach for the Office of Human Rights. For the most part, the Salvation Army represents the only place where an unhoused person can find shelter in Charlottesville year-round. I think the only other alternative, at least that our office knows about, is Pachem, and that only applies for some like maybe 4 to 6 months based on temperature, and that has its own kind of series of logistical concerns. But
Sure. Yep.
kind of besides that, something that I don't know if you have any insight into through the Salvation Army is maybe what are opportunities maybe for collaboration, so it doesn't just fall on to the Salvation Army to provide beds for people. I don't know if these are collaborations that the Salvation Army has been looking to like cultivate throughout Charlottesville or in Albemarle.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, are we looking at maybe satellite shelters? Is that what you're referring to?
I was kind of just hoping for maybe any insight you could like provide, maybe as to the future of developing more housing opportunities. Satellite shelter sounds like a very cool concept. Or I don't know if there's anything that the Salvation Army like knows about or has been trying to develop or is like looking for collaboration opportunities.
Right. So there is nothing in place right now, but again, so let me take a step back. We have a very engaged advisory board for the Salvation Army. So our board of directors is actually based in Atlanta. And so in each community, we use community leaders who are advisory board members. And I think that would be something that our advisory board would be interested in taking on. How can we better engage, maybe help staff, help fund some potential satellite shelters? What would that look like? How do we provide a safe, secure environment for individuals? We were very intentional about keeping the Ridge Street property because of A, our history there, but B, the locale of our clientele and our guests, and they know where we're at. So we did not want to move our shelter. So to open up a potential satellite, winter sheltering, something like that is always something that we're going to be willing to look at. Bottom line, it comes down to funding and resource staffing and just making that available. I was, for many years, a executive director for Habitat for Humanity. So housing, secure housing, sustainable housing is something of a high priority for myself as I've moved here to Charlottesville.
I think that answers my question. Thank you.
Hi, I just wanted to follow up to something you said to Mary a minute ago, because I had asked you about what individuals need to do in order to come into your shelter, and you just mentioned to Mary that you do background checks. So you've sort of alluded to drug testing, and you mentioned background checks. Is there a list of things that have to happen when people come into shelter? Can you just describe to us what it is that people need
Sure.
to complete and what you do?
You're basically asking me our intake process, and I'm going to be honest with you. I don't have 100% clarity on our intake process just yet, and I'd be happy to send that forward to you as well in a written document. But if a shelter is not doing a basic level sex offense background check, then we are not doing due diligence. We currently have 16 children on our property. And if we're not doing a sex offender background check, then we're missing it. We should be doing that for sure.
one quick question about that. I'm sorry, I know we're piling on lots here, but,
Help me out.
so,
Yep.
this question of background checks, I mean, I would imagine that's quite expensive and time consuming. Is this applied equitably and equally, like every single person that comes in there is subject to a background check? Or do you pick and choose who is subjected to a background check?
Yeah, we're very sensitive to if we do, for instance, a drug test on an individual, we have to drug test every individual. We cannot target individuals. And that would be the case for background checks and breathalyzers and those kind of things. So if we have like an established night that we're going to do breath on holding test, it has to be on every individual who comes in the shelter. It cannot be targeted.
Thank you.
Good evening, Captain. My name's Todd Niemeyer. I'm the Director of the Human Rights Commission in office. Work with Jessica as chair. I have a few structural questions. In the new facility, you said there's going to be 114 beds, which is great. Glad to hear about the expansion. Is that majority, how much of that is congregate shelter and how much of that is individual rooms? And the reason I ask is in the people that I've worked with in the community, I do see when folks have, for example, perhaps a disability, a mental health concern, or maybe a mobility challenge, that sometimes they have a hard time existing in a congregate space. And so I'm curious if you're making any kind of adjustments there. I think the majority is congregate now, with some
Correct.
small apartments, but any change in the makeup there?
Sure. So once again, let me go back to those stats. Currently, there are 58 beds, and I'm going to guess that those are pretty equally divided between male and female. We are building out 114 beds for sheltering. That's an additional 56 beds total in our sheltering. Currently, there are 9 transitional apartments, and we are reducing it to 7 transitional apartments, but the apartments have additional beds. So we are actually not losing any beds in our transitional apartments. So, I mean, you'd have to understand, on any given night, we may have a family come in and the family needs that apartment. Well, and now we're full. The next night, we may have an individual who comes in and maybe for whatever reason, they're not able to be in congregate housing. And they've stated that. There's a concern about it. Well, then we technically may be full and not able to serve them if all those beds are filled. And so it is a bit of a balancing act. If a family comes in that needs it, then we provide it. If the next night, we have someone who could benefit from it, but we don't have it, then it's just simply we're at capacity for that section.
Thanks for that answer. So just to also maybe another clarifying question. So it sounds like there will still be majority congregate, and I don't know how many people will be in a room. And that's one question. How many people will be in a room generally in the congregate spaces? And is it still a bunk system, or are there going to be an increase in first? I don't know what you would say. First level
single
beds.
bed. Single bed.
Single beds.
Single bed. Yep.
Because I do hear that is often a concern, is that folks with, for example, like a mobility challenge, may seek to get shelter, but there's only top bunks available.
Yep. So the congregate housing is really going to be kind of like cubicles, if you will, 3 walls, and it'll be 2 sets of bunks or 1 set of bunks on both sides. So it's 4 beds in a cubicle area, and then they will have lockers and storage space for each of those 4 beds, and there will be a series of those on each dorm floor.
Okay, that's similar to the current setup, right? I think it's 4 beds per room, 2 bunk systems, basically.
Similar, yep.
Okay.
Yeah. Now we do have the large I don't know what you would call them, the large dorm area that has multiple beds. But the design, again, goes back to a cubicle, so there's a little more privacy, but you have 4 people in a cubicle area. It had to be done this way in order to get the beds that we need for the capacity of the building.
Thank you.
So, this is Jessica Harris, the chair. Just a few more questions. So, how many people can fit, so, I think it's like your language, and so it's 9 transitional apartments currently. It's gonna go down to 7. What's the capacity of each transitional apartment? So like what capacity is actually decreasing?
I'm sorry, can you say the last thing?
What's the capacity that's decreasing? So, I mean, I'm seeing from 9 to 7, so that means to me that there's a reduction in how many people can stay in the transitional apartment. But you're saying
Sure.
there isn't
So,
that.
yeah, so I'm just reading off of our notes. Currently, there are 4 apartments with 1 bedroom. And then there's 2 apartments with 2-bedroom units. We are going to 7 units, and they are each 2-bedroom units. So we're changing the number of units, but we are not affecting the number of beds in total.
Gotcha. Okay, that makes sense. And when construction begins, what's the capacity of the shelter? Will it be reduced in any way?
In the new shelter?
During construction, will the capacity
no.
be decreased?
No. So the current shelter building will remain. And then once the construction is completed, all of our shelter guests will move into the new property, and we will then demo the old building.
Okay. And I did get a chance to view the committee meeting, and I do really appreciate, I know we're asking you really hard and pointed questions, because our mission today is then to provide a written letter potentially to city council to support this effort. So I just really appreciate your patience and allowing us to be very direct with you. So I did get to watch the planning committee. What are some issues that you have heard from the community, concerns from the community, and also potential needs with this project?
Well, the potential needs is definitely the increase of housing and providing for those. And I will guarantee you, it will not take long for us to reach capacity of the new building. It just simply will happen. The most pressing need that has come out of any community engagement meetings is just the position of our parking lot. Because our parking lot switches sides of our property, the parking lot exit is near the driveways of the houses on the other side of 4th Street. And so we are working through our options in making sure that our neighbors are not put out in any way with traffic flow.
And I know one of the counselors was mentioning the just concern in the quality for the playground. Is that something that's going to be still in consideration with your team and project?
Yeah, it was very interesting that she kept bringing that up, and I do think it's important. I'm very new to the community, but I think the closest playground is down on Cherry Street next to our thrift store. Am I correct?
Yeah, Sunsler Park.
Yeah. So I think it's important for us to, as soon as possible, to upgrade and build out our playground for the children that'll be in our programs. And I will also say this relative to the new property. We pay a lot of attention to security, especially when it comes to vulnerable adults and to children. Our current property is very open. Individuals from 4th Street, from that area, they walk through our building. They walk, not through our building, but through our property. And they walked right past my office on a regular basis to get over to Ridge Street. That is not a public thoroughway. The public thoroughway takes them back down to Dice Street and over to Ridge Street. So we're trying to be much more secure about this new property. It will be gated. more security for the playgrounds also. So if we can come up with the money, a grant for the playground, I have no issue writing that into our construction budget and making that happen as part of this project.
Okay, thank you for that. Is there anything else you want us to consider or be informed of as we make a decision to recommend this to City Council?
You know, I want to go back just to the kind lady that spoke at the podium a few minutes ago. And I have to say to you, you know, our national motto for the Salvation Army is doing the most good. It doesn't mean that we are the best at what we do. There are always areas that we need people to speak into the Salvation Army and say, to be the best provider in our community, will you hear us out? And I want to assure the Human Rights Commission that you are more than welcome to send recommendations, concerns to me. Send them directly to me, and I will address them to my staff. If you hear of concerns with the LGBTQ community, any potential racism issues, and even just our services in general, we want to become the best partner to the city that we can be.
I appreciate that. Our email is hrcommission@charlottesville.gov. I know we've had communication with you. Maybe we can get that to you just so you can have it. So I know there was some follow-up with just our request for intake information and our concerns around how LGBTQIA individuals are supported within your shelter. So,
Jessica, could I ask for one other piece of
yeah,
information?
one more second. Did you want to write that down, or do you want me to?
We can.
Can you
we
give
can
that to me
send-
again, please?
Yeah, it's hrcommission@charlottesville.gov.
So I did have one additional question, and I think it's very possible you don't know the answer to it yet, and that's fine, and that's why I wanted to just lay it out here, in case that's something you could get back to us about. But when I asked about non-English speakers, you mentioned that you had a couple Spanish-speaking families, and I'm just wondering what happens if someone comes to an intake that speaks Arabic and you don't have an Arabic speaker there? What is your process or your language access plan to serve those individuals? And at that, again, if you don't have an answer now, that's totally understandable, but would
Sure,
love to
yeah.
know that.
Yeah, I mean, we obviously need to have our systems in place to be able to address people like that. We honestly, we would probably initially rely on MrGoogle.com and, you know, try to communicate with somebody through that. We do have I would say, a pretty diverse staff at our divisional office. And if need be, we could reach out to our divisional office as well, and they can help us communicate for some of these emergency concerns. But when we start getting into case conferencing, case management again, we have to have people around us that can effectively articulate the needs and where these guests are at in their life.
Thank you.
We'll send you our updated, we're just conversing about our email address. I think I gave you one that sends it to just us. I'll just I'll find your email and just send it to you to make sure that you have that. Are there any other final questions of commissioners?
Thank you, sir.
Thank you,
Thank you
Ms.
so
Thank
much.
Thank you so much for
Thank
your
you.
time. We really do appreciate it. And look forward to meeting you and your wife in the future.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you, everybody. I appreciate your time.
Thank you. Bye.
Welcome to Charlottesville.
Yeah, welcome to Charlottesville. Bye.
Yeah, I think that'll work, actually.
You think that one will work? So, I'm gonna have a drink of water. Is that right?
I think you would do that now, yeah.
All right, well, thank y'all for your very engaging questions. What are y'all thoughts about recommending this expansion to city council? Yes. Catherine?
I have a question, and I don't know who, maybe Todd can help us with this. In terms of things like LGBTQ inclusion at the shelter, which, you know, we know historically has been horrific at the Salvation Army. What, if any, role does the Human Rights Commission have in ensuring that they treat people equitably, right? Are they a landlord?
So if someone were receiving housing there, right, and they felt that they were being discriminated against, or they were pursuing a housing opportunity there and felt that they were denied, they could file a complaint with the office. Yeah, and so, yeah, any of the protected classes that are protected under the Virginia Fair Housing Law and the ordinance. So, yeah,
Okay.
that's your role. And so if there's a complaint, we would do what we usually do through our complaint process, which is see if we can seek resolution through informal dialogue, mediation, or investigation. If we render a finding, now with the current ordinance, if we render finding of reasonable cause, that would then move to the city attorney's office to file civil action on behalf of the complainant. And if there's a dismissal or a finding of no reasonable cause, sorry, not probable anymore, no reasonable cause, they could appeal to the commission, at which point you would hold an appeal hearing.
So, given that the captain said he, you know, abides by federal and local law, it would seem like he would want to make sure he was in compliance.
Sure, sure.
So, yeah, it seems like we really need to get those policies in writing and make sure we agree with them.
Yeah, I would follow up. My own ability to support that would be contingent upon their saying very clearly that they have committed to a non-discrimination policy, you know, on the basis of LGBTQ individuals, but also that they have a language access plan to serve all members of the community. There may be some other concerns, but I would personally think that's essential for us to say. I mean, we obviously need more housing for unhoused people, but I feel like as a Human Rights Commission, we have to be committed to non-discrimination in the provision of that housing.
All right, so go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, I feel exactly the same.
Yeah, so how much time we gonna, I mean, he has just been here a month and getting the lay of the land of what has been here or what is here. So how much time are we gonna allow him to find out what gaps that we are asking him to fill, before we decide to, help support and write this letter to city council?
Right, so the question is to support, because city council currently has a lot of opposition and pros for this expansion. We can write, I mean, it sounds like there's an urgent, like we need to this month send something to city council in supporting the expansion or not supporting the expansion. Happy to say our current concerns, but I mean, I wanted it off of what Ernest is saying also.
We could certainly indicate support that is contingent upon their agreeing to non-discrimination and to, you know, access for all individuals. I mean, like, I don't think any of us would support expanded housing if it only served people of one race, right? Like I just feel strongly that we need to, as the Human Rights Commission, insist on a commitment to non-discrimination as part of any support for expansion, which otherwise I would be delighted to support.
You have to unmute, Lindell, please. I've watched ones where people weren't, and it's really hard to hear and follow.
Yeah. So I agree that there is a sense of urgency, and I understand that, and I think that having a time frame in which we get answers is important. I do worry a little bit that having a contingency in a letter, it has no effect.
Yeah.
Right? I worry a little bit that say, well, we support this as long as X, and then nobody follows up to make sure that X happened, right? And so I'm open to whatever the group thinks, but I would not sign off on something that wasn't very clearly, explicitly saying, we need to know that if a trans man walks in the building and says, I need, you know, housing, that they can stay in the men's section if that's the way they do things, right? I mean, we need to be very clear about that, because I got the I got the impression that that was kind of very fluid and maybe not going to be. I mean, I just don't know. I want to hear clearly what the policy is about LGBTQ and maybe even particularly trans clients. I want to know what's going to happen. And I would not support something personally that was not clearly articulated in an equitable way.
I agree, but also, like he said, I think he has guidelines that he has to follow.
Yeah.
That, so, again, I would love to give him an opportunity to, find out what those things are, those gaps that we are bringing up to him that he hasn't maybe thought of or hasn't been a concern as of yet with him getting here. And give him some time to do that. I know, budget season really heats up September, October with the city, that they're starting to get stuff and nail down things. So we may have maybe a month or so that we can get this information from him and get some clarity on the questions that we asked him. So we don't have to do that right now as far as putting a letter out, but we need to keep this on the forefront of our decision about that, because I'm with you. I don't want to send a letter with contingencies. I'd rather send a letter knowing what we asked was taken care of, or we have answers to those questions.
Do we know when it's going to see, oh, sorry.
I just want to ask a clarifying question, because you mentioned budget, but I thought the vote coming up is about a special use permit for the construction.
I think so. The planning
It is.
commission approved it at the
Right,
most recent
okay.
meeting, and then the NBC 29 articles is, and then it goes to city council for
Right.
approval.
Right.
I just checked their
Okay.
agenda. There's no agenda posted for the meeting in 2 weeks. think
I was
the
just
most
wondering
recent
how
council
quickly
meeting
it's
was
going to
was
council.
this week.
Yeah.
So we probably would have 2 weeks minimum to flip it, week and a
Okay.
half. It
All
might
right,
be
so,
worth knowing if it's going to be on the agenda packet for the next city council meeting.
okay, so I guess the question is, do we support do we support the special use permit for them to build
That's
the
what
the building?
I'm asking.
Just one maybe other consideration. I think that you could support the expansion, but articulate, and the reason I would say that maybe the value in supporting the expansion is that while it is important to serve everyone, there are a lot of people right now who could use that additional service. And so I think that saying we support the expansion, but saying we would also like a clear policy that states this, right? And by which I mean, I think we want this expansion regardless, but we also want it to be equitable. The policy piece can actually happen while they're building it, right? But getting it built seems very, very important, just given the shortage of emergency shelter that we have in our community.
Yeah. That's
And,
where,
and no one else seems to be stepping up to say that we're gonna build more emergency shelter right now.
Do we agree on that?
That's what I'm trying to get some clarity on what Todd said, because I don't think I do.
Mike?
Before I say I don't agree, I want to make sure I understand what you were saying,
Mhm.
okay? So, this is a very difficult position for me personally, and maybe for others, okay? Because I recognize the importance of housing. I also recognize that this is a position of power for us as well, and to not take advantage of that is a missed opportunity, because we could also say, no, we don't, let me just use me. I don't approve of a special use permit for a situation in which we suspect and don't know that inequity will occur. And that's my personal feeling. So if you were to write a letter, if the group were to write a letter, I would leave my name off of right now until we hear clearly, right? That's my value judgment. That's my value thing. When we know an inequity is happening, I can't sign off on saying, yes, go ahead. Because I think that may push them to change their policy. Or it may, I don't know. But it's just me personally could not sign off on something that I felt was clearly inequitable. That's all.
so I am struggling with I feel like I'm like a body divided right now in terms of how, like, I literally like, I have a pit in my stomach right now because, so some of the things I hear, one, and I think Jessica, you just said this, there's already opposition to this in the community and support for it in the community. I personally, and I hear it, but I can't imagine not wanting to support more beds in this community because, I mean, and I struggle with, and what you said, Todd, in terms of, is there a way that we can support, is there a way we can support the beds? I don't know how much city council will consider, will consider a letter from us versus if we don't say anything at all, right? Like, I don't know how that plays. I recognize from a political perspective, we're in a place of, as we know, like, it doesn't sound like there's overwhelming support or overwhelming opposition. Like, there's definitely both sides playing out. So it feels, to me personally, like I would like us to find a way to be able, and I think we're all saying this, to be able to support this and be able to put our name on a letter and say the Human Rights Commission does support this as one more tick in the let's get some more beds in this city. Because I mean, I almost asked, but I was like, I think the train's left the building. I'm like, how many stories up can that building go? I mean, quite frankly, I hate to say it, but and so that's what I'm struggling with right now. And it can't be, we have to do everything in our power to make sure that it does not discriminate. But as Todd, as you said, at what point, because even if, I don't know when this lands on the city council agenda. It could land on the city council agenda in, the next couple of weeks. And so that's what I don't know that will we feel, and I don't know what the answers will be, but will we feel satisfied? And at what point will we feel satisfied enough to be able to put our names on this letter? I mean, I have lots of cringeworthy moments related to the Salvation Army and so that, like, let me just be very clear about that. And it's so hard because it's this political lightning rod as the Salvation Army that is the entity who's getting ready to finally put beds into this community, and that's what I'm really struggling with right now.
I just want to add this perspective. I think we're putting him on the hot spot tonight with very pointed questions that I think if he brings this back to his team tonight and says they were really asking about these policies, I didn't know, and he could email us tomorrow with them, that may be sufficient. I'm just kind of asking back to Ernest's point, like, what do we need to move forward?
I mean, every commissioner probably has draws a line in a different place, but from me, I need a commitment to non-discrimination. And if they cannot, they can say, we're doing lots of things wrong now, but this is our commitment and we will say that. Without that, I just think it's very problematic. We wouldn't support 100 more beds for white people, right? Like, that would be so deeply offensive.
I'm not
We would
disagreeing
never
with you.
do that, right? And so asking them to say we will not discriminate, like, that's
Not a hard
pretty
ask.
easy, right?
Yeah.
Like, go have your conversations. That's what they should do, right?
I don't disagree. I feel your anger coming towards me.
Yeah, no, I'm not.
And I'm just
I'm
telling
not
you
coming
how
toward, I really am not coming
that's
toward
all.
you. That's just,
I'm
how-
not disagreeing with anything y'all are saying. I'm just telling you how I'm receiving it in this moment. I just want to make sure we can, what we need, clearly, do we need, like, I want to be able to send a follow-up if that's what we want to plan to do. I don't know what we're planning to do, but if it's a email that explicitly says that we need this statement that says da-da-da-da, like, that's just, I'm just trying to get to it. What do we need to do after this moment?
So from a very practical point of view, one, I agree, we can't support it if they're going to discriminate, so we need to know they're not going to discriminate. I don't think that we will get satisfactory answers in the time that we need to before sending a letter of support or not is needed. I personally would feel comfortable going on the record, because honestly, like, it's not like our support's gonna make or break this, right? This is going on the record. So I would feel comfortable going on the record saying we support the expansion with the very important provision that they are committed to non-discrimination, and specifically in these issues that we have concerns on, you know, something like that. So at least like our concerns are clear, and then I think as a commission, we can commit to following up with the Salvation Army and saying, hey, we'd like to know what your policies are. You know, this is what the city kind of requires of you under its human rights ordinance, and we want to make sure you're in compliance with that.
Can I
Get a light bulb moment.
just give you two interesting maybe points to consider. So first of all, it looks like the special use permit request for the property gets its first reading at the August 7th council meeting. I looked at the subsequent, the agendas are still under construction for subsequent council meetings, so I don't know when the second reading is. Typically, it's like the next meeting or maybe a month after. So that's something to consider. The other thing to consider, you asked earlier about what is the commission's power with regard to addressing issues of discrimination. With housing, it's a particularly interesting thing, and it's like interacting with our new ordinance is like, it's kind of a work in progress because there's some expanded authority here, and I think one of the things I'd call your attention to is in section 2-435, as it currently reads, it says in D, where the commission in accordance with subsection A, which is talking about identifying systemic issues, herein identifies systemic discriminatory housing practices, housing specifically. The commission may, upon majority vote of its members, request that the director of the commission file a complaint of discrimination in situations when there is no named complainant, but factual evidence exists to support a prima facie case of systemic discriminatory housing practice. So, and then we would follow the same complaint and investigation procedures for fair housing complaints under the other part of the ordinance. But point being is that you do have a mechanism to say, hey, you built this thing. We said we really want to see a policy that shows that you're non-discriminatory with regard to sexual orientation, transgender status, and gender identity. What's that?
And language.
Oh, and language as well. But saying later on, you can check in on that, right? Like, so as a commission, you could say, hey, we never saw a copy of that policy. Can you send it to us? If you, in your read of that policy, detect systemic discrimination, we can act. So there's something to think about there, is that you're not powerless after you make this recommendation and things are set in motion. So just a food for thought.
Thank you.
Yep.
Can I, sorry. I was just gonna say, I mean, to the point of like what we will get back, I mean, you know, he talked about federal and local laws, as well as governed by the Salvation Army nationally, et cetera. And so I assume what we're gonna get back is a statement that they have on, that Salvation Army USA has on their website, which is committed to accommodating all those in need without unlawful discrimination or harassment based on age, race, color, religion, sex, national origin, marital status, disability, citizenship, sexual orientation, gender identity, gender expression, or any other characteristic in accordance with our capacity to help. So I'm gonna guess, like, and I don't know how we feel about that, but I just wanna name that that is not something that I knew that the Salvation Army had put out, but it is part of their national. I'm not looking at the local right now.
Yeah. I will just point out
Yeah.
that phrase is used by lots and lots of organizations who still discriminate widely.
Of course, I'm just saying that my assumption is that that's what we would receive
Right,
back.
and that's not enough for me. I mean, I don't know about others, but that wouldn't do it for me.
I think, Lindell, you highlighted that since Captain Mark is newer to the community, he has an opportunity to sort of address the historical relationship the Salvation Army has had and be proactive, instead of saying they do not discriminate. That if you are a transgender woman, you will be able to have a room that is safe and that is affirming of your gender identity. And that's something that they can say, if that is the case, as opposed to we do not discriminate.
Right, that's right. I would like to see those specific.
Something proactive.
And I will be honest and say I would really like to see the language is concerning to me, because the language is not it's not clear, right? It's very carefully worded, and I want really clear language, unambiguous. And I will also point out that we are unlikely, I suspect, that will be hard to get.
So I have a question. So you're concerned with the language of what she just read?
No, that language is pretty standard,
That's pretty-
pretty
Okay,
boilerplate.
so what language do you need
So I
clarification
think
on?
what we specifically asked is, you know, if the gender identity is respected, and again, you know, I don't know how by law, I don't know where, you know, where you can pull out law and say that, right? Do we have the power if someone comes to us and says, a trans woman comes to us and says, I was told I had to stay in the men's section at the Salvation Army. Can we march in there and go, hang on?
Yeah, if if an individual had a complaint like that, they could file the complaint with the Office of Human Rights, and we could certainly look into that. Yes. Yeah, that's covered by state law and ordinance, yeah.
So that's the kind of thing that I would like to hear from them. I would like to hear those specific examples that, yes, we will do this.
So may I make a suggestion? So what I would say is in a letter, I think you would really want to stipulate, like, please provide your standard operating procedure with regard to the practice when somebody presents as a transgender man or woman and is seeking shelter, what type of room are they offered, all those things, like, just really stipulate and say, get their procedures on that, because it's one thing, I think a policy statement is more of a blanket, like, of course we would do the right thing, but you're saying, how will you do the right thing? That's what you're really asking, is what are your procedures?
Right. And I think in that letter that we actually say, this is our expectation, the Human Rights Commission, this is what we expect, and
Sure.
we will be watching.
Sure.
We
But
will
can I
follow.
recommend that we separate that from the support for the special use permit?
Yeah.
How would that look?
That we say that we support a special use permit for expanded beds with the provision that they do not discriminate in these specific ways in particular. And then as a commission, our work moving forward separately is to follow up to get that more specific stuff, right? Just because in the next, before August 7th, I don't think we'll be able to get the level of
Yes, I agree with
specificity
you.
on that.
That's fine.
Can I also, I know we owe him well, it sounds like we weren't sure on what the email address is, so it makes, and he was jotting things down in terms of what to send. But it also makes me wonder if in the follow-up with the email, we restate, these are the things so we've got that in writing to him as well. Like, these are the things, because we're fleshing it out right now, that we plan, if we decide, we plan to support you with the special use permit. However, our language will also include this, and these are the things we'd like to hear from you. So it's really, really clear, because I think we're fleshing things out even more during this conversation that he's not privy to right now. So that that we're all on the same page, and then he can be really clear about what this commission will be watching for and listening for and paying attention to.
And just to make sure there wasn't confusion about, when I talked about language access, I was talking about separate from the LGBTQ issue.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Languages.
Yep.
And I would say it is so
National page.
highly inappropriate to ask another resident to be an interpreter for
Yeah.
social services for a family. That is an appalling practice. And I recognize, like, having worked at lots of underfunded social services, I recognize that, like, it's hard to do it right, but that is just highly inappropriate. So I would be comfortable with supporting the special use permit as long as we say, provided there is this commitment to these things. And if that makes it a slightly weaker letter, like, I think we live with it. I mean, I think we want more beds, we support more beds, we need more beds, people are desperate, people are unhoused, it's terrible, right?
Yeah.
But I don't think it undermines that to say, but we also expect a commitment to non-discrimination and to fair treatment for all.
I agree.
And to also communicate that those policies to the public too, to have them displayed that way. So if someone, housing is a universal need, somebody needs housing, they know what to expect. They know if their immigration status is going to be asked. They know that they're going to be able to have housing that affirms their gender identity, so that those things are communicated to the public as well. They're not just sort of policies that are maybe somewhere but not publicly known.
Well, and I think that, to your point, goes hand in hand with something that somebody over here said earlier about, I think you started to say something about like getting training, et cetera, but what I thought you were gonna say at first was, making sure that the Salvation Army is really communicating out to communities about, because there is a, misconception, not misconceptions, there is, perceptions or reality about what's happened, and so as you're talking about policies, I'd want the community to be, not even just somebody coming in, but the community to know the policies, so people actually might feel more comfortable seeking out the Salvation Army in a way that perhaps, and I don't have the history at all in this community, but that perhaps might not have been comfortable seeking out in the past.
Yeah.
So I think it's like the double, yeah.
So are we recommending that I send a follow-up email to Captain Mark to say we are supportive of the expansion, but due to our ordinance and identifying systemic racism, we still would like to follow up with you on standards and procedures related to non-discriminatory practices plus transparency, I think in what you were talking about, Catherine, of the intake process. And then the support potentially to city council is that we do support this and we will be following up with them to ensure that they are following through with non-discriminatory practices.
I think our support should say we support with the provision, like, provided that they, right? I mean, city council could say, I don't know what they can say. I don't know if they can do that with a special use permit, but city council should be saying, we hope you're not discriminating, right?
All right, so here's my question about that. Go ahead.
Victoria, sorry.
Sorry, thank you. I don't mean to interrupt. It's maybe just to like say from the service provision and that like about the language piece, they are them being the only shelter in town means that there are undocumented families living there now.
Yeah.
Who have been able to access like social services through Salvation Army. That doesn't mean that they shouldn't have like a built-in like procedure for it, but the material reality is that people have been able to go there from the Spanish-speaking community with no documentation and no money, and in some cases like no documentation, including no passport, no lease, and like nothing except like maybe an ICE letter. And so that is something that is not acceptable for them to be asking other residents to interpret for them, since that is labor that's not compensated and you don't know the quality of that interpretation. But also, almost no social services in Charlottesville have Spanish speakers, and that's not to say anything about like the many other languages that are like there's almost no Dari speakers employed in any social services, and that includes on the city's end.
But you could have a contract with language now, right?
They do.
That could be a-
That's true.
Yeah, lots of services that
The
are
hospital.
available that people use to make sure that, I mean, and it's not just, I mean, it's the confidentiality of their information if they're applying for, I mean, that's, really is problematic, and I know, I'm sorry.
It's not to
No,
defend
I
them. It's not to
appreciate-
defend them. It's
I
just,
appreciate you saying that, I really, I do, I think, for
Mary,
me,
your
our
mic's not
support
on.
has to be contingent upon their commitment, their stated commitment, and I just feel like that has to be in the letter, for me. I mean, I can obviously be outvoted, but I would say.
we can spell it out for sure.
Yes. I hope meeting with ICE is not really one of the goals he sets for those families.
With individuals that are not happy with the building of this facility, and some of the neighbors are concerned with traffic and all those type of things, I'm having a hard time. I mean, I hear everyone. I just don't want to give any more ammunition to folk that don't want to see this project go through. And the things that we're talking about that are not going to help this project go through. And I just, in my heart of hearts, I just truly believe that this gentleman and his wife and the staff are there are going to do their best to take care of anyone who walks within those doors. Now, I hear that there are people that have heard stories or have information about things that have happened in the past within that space of salvation. But my hope is that we will get those questions to him. He will respond to us, and we will be able to send a letter without contingencies. I'm done.
That would be lovely.
Hmm?
I said, that would be really lovely.
And so we're gonna stop right there. And we're not gonna say, I just don't believe it, or I don't feel it. No, I believe that's gonna happen. And then when it doesn't happen, then we'll go from there. But I would love to give this man an opportunity to answer these questions, fill this out, and try to make a way. I just want to give him a chance.
I love the spirit of that, Ernest, and I totally agree that I don't want to give ammunition to the people who are like, what about parking? Like,
Yeah.
parking?
Yeah.
My only concern, very practically speaking,
Mhm.
is that the letter needs to go out in the next 2 weeks.
I hear that.
And there's, and he's going to respond, and then we are not going to be meeting.
I
And
hear
so
it.
there's no, we're not giving Jessica any, like, we need to give Jessica something she can do without us having, you know what I'm saying? Like, we
I do.
can't, we're not gonna be able to, so you saying he's gonna send the stuff and we'll be able to send a letter without any provisions in it, I don't see how practically speaking that can happen.
Like I said, I'm hoping it will work.
But here's what I'm saying,
Yeah.
we won't have a meeting, even if he sends the stuff, we will not be able to make a decision about whether or not it meets our criteria or not, because there isn't a meeting in time.
Do we have to meet face to face to send letters?
We can't have a,
Vote or anything like? Because we've sent letters like that before.
we can't vote by email. And so what I'm trying to do is give Jessica language that we all agree on, that
I mean, if y'all gonna do that, I just don't think it's fair to that gentleman. To, within 2 weeks, to turn that around and give him a chance. But, you know.
So, one thought, let's maybe just talk about timing for a second. So you, do you have,
a, yeah, I was gonna say, go ahead.
you have a publicly noticed meeting
August 3rd.
August 3rd.
When are materials for council packets due?
What's that?
When are materials for council packets due?
You don't have to put this in, you're not gonna be able to get it into the council packet, but
Okay.
you can send a letter to council at any time.
Okay.
That's not a
Okay.
big deal.
Okay.
But
We can always attend.
I think that you could discuss it again as a group.
August 3rd.
It's not necessarily something you have to vote on, it's kind of a thing where you can discuss and come to a consensus, but you would want to, I think that you'd want to do that in a public process rather than over email.
Yeah.
August 3rd at what time is it?
6:30.
6:30.
Is that the one that's over in Pleasant Ridge?
I don't believe that's this one, that's
No,
coming up
that's-
later,
it's
yeah,
okay, it's
yeah.
okay.
That's here.
Yeah, thanks for pointing that out. We do have a few movements coming up, so, that might be a process for you if you wanted to send an email to the captain and say, hey, we're planning on finalizing our letter. These are the concerns that we have. This is kind of the time frame in which we
Yeah.
have to submit this so that council can think about it. Can you provide us something before August 3rd so that we can consider it in our own meeting? And maybe that, and then you see what you get, right? Like the kind of the best, opportunity for him to respond. And maybe the outcome that Ernest is looking for will happen. And then if not, you have to think about it again.
The timing makes sense to me. Nothing makes sense to us.
So, Mary, can you unmute just, because I'm about to ask you a question?
Yep.
Do Mary, Catherine, and Liddell are one, or both, or all three together? Do y'all mind writing this down? Like, I heard it, I know what you want to say, but just asking, like, what directly you want me to ask him for? It sounds like we just want clarity as far as standard procedures related to non-discriminatory practices in the intake. Do you mind just drafting that, so I can follow up with him?
We can do that. And the intake stuff, I'm interested in, but we don't need that.
Oh,
for this
whatever
one.
is
Yeah.
needed, it just, if you
Yeah.
could include that for me, so I make sure I don't miss anything.
I'm happy to work with you.
Yeah, sure. That's
I'd
great.
like to join the writing as well. I had all the same questions and y'all
Oh,
beat me to
good.
it.
We got to be the quieter side of the
Yeah.
table, or the quieter side of the house over here.
Yeah. Okay, so, not that I have to summarize it now.
Go, Jessica.
You got it. I'm paying attention and I'm listening. It's overwhelming sometimes. So to move on from this point, we will have commissioners who will work on drafting a follow-up message to Captain Mark that we will then send to him with specific information that then we can finalize our thoughts and decision in our special meeting, so that we can just like knock off that, we will have that special work session next month, and that's, part of that discussion will be this. Okay, now, 2 things. Any other thoughts, comments about this before we move on? So what I had as far as chair update is I know I've mentioned this several times since we've been back in person, and Todd and I actually got to talk about it, and something I've learned a lot of being on many different teams is just setting norms, and I think we've never established norms since I've been chair, or I don't know if Ernest has been, and I wanted to ask if that's something that we can do, either bringing in someone to kind of create that. I think norms that are created with everyone in the room and everyone in their thoughts, I think it just makes it easier to ebb and flow. I think we've just made a lot of transition from being in person, where I think there were default norms, to, in virtual versus being in person, and just kind of wanted to hear y'all thoughts. If y'all think all is well, then we don't have to have that, but I just kind of want to know y'all thoughts about norms.
Jessica, was there anything in particular that brought this up for you, or?
Yeah, it's being back in person, and I think there's just not clear, like, just the way we're seated, like, I see y'all really well, I have to, like, bring my neck to see you guys. So I just wanna establish, like, how we're treating each other. It's a lot being chair sometimes, and just, I think there's just dynamic changes that have happened, and I feel like it's easier for me as chair and easier for us as a group if we all agree upon, like, this is how we're gonna treat each other, this is how we want the meeting to flow, we're gonna raise hands, like Catherine does, like I mentioned that last time. Catherine, you've been doing a great job about it this time, like raising your hand. I know it feels childish, but it's easier for me to see people, or if you're, like, it's kind of harder here if you're raising your hand, so I'm trying to be conscious of that.
Right.
But just, I think it just would help. There's no one specific thing. It's a combination of a lot of things that makes my role as chair just feel harder than it should be. That I just don't want that. I'm here just like all of y'all, committed to this work, committed to all of y'all, like individually, how you care. And I just think it makes it easier for me as chair, and not just making me comfortable. I think it'd help just everyone to understand, like, how we are flowing, how we're going. So for example, like last meeting, it was really hard in a virtual setting. Like, we went back a couple of things that I had moved from, and it was just like, it's chaos to wrangle that, especially in a virtual setting. And it's chaos to wrangle that too in this setting. So just setting up better, like, this is how we're gonna flow, this is how we're gonna ask questions, this is how we're gonna respectfully disagree. I don't imagine that we're all gonna agree with each other. I love that about our team, but we wanna do it in a respectful manner.
I would feel comfortable if you just gave us things you want us to do, rather than having a meeting to set norms.
Okay.
I'm not speaking for everyone else, but, right, so.
I'm okay with that too.
I might, I'm down, yeah, you see.
Yeah.
You're
I
like,
can't see. I heard your name. I heard your voice.
I agree, and perhaps I could see it being worthwhile to come with some set of norms, and maybe we just spend 15 minutes workshopping them together rather than go through an entire conversation, but maybe there might be something that sparks for somebody else. It's like, oh, let's add this, or let's change this. So maybe that's the in-between option, the medium.
Mary.
Yeah, I'm comfortable with that. I really feel like you, Jessica, and Ernest as vice chair are kind of empowered to, like, set the basic rules by which we operate. And so if I talk without raising my hand, you can say, Mary, I told you in the last meeting, you gotta raise your hand. I apologize, but, no, but I mean, I don't mind having a discussion, and we do this at work all the time, like the community norms and read them. Like, if you want that, that's fine, but I also think you will have plenty of authority to tell us how to operate, and we have to live with that.
Oh, yeah, I agree, because I'm very bad at not raising my hand to talk, so I do apologize about that, but I will definitely.
It's an advantage of being tall.
It should be, but yeah.
Okay, I just wanted to bring it up. I know I appreciate everyone being lighthearted with it. I've rarely seen when a leader has said, like, this is what I need, and then people comply, because they're like, Mary's giving me the stink eye because I told her to raise her hand. You know, like, I don't know. I'm not saying that, I'm just saying an example. Like, usually team norms.
This is why I always speak out of
when
turn.
we all agree. So if y'all are saying I need to put something together and y'all are all gonna agree and we can have some discussion, I'm happy with that.
Yes, well, thank you. This is why I always end up speaking out of turn. I'm happy to accept any group norms you want to impose or recommend to the group. Strikes me that might be a lot of work too, to be like, hey, just come up with it. We'll comply. So maybe a suggestion, which I can do if you want to do that, but to lighten the burden, maybe we can all sort of bring our own expectations. You can bring yours, and we combine them at the next working group.
Yeah, I think so I'm gonna move on from this point and just like in our next meeting, 15 minutes, I'll come with mine, y'all come with yours. We can agree hopefully on them and just move forward, because I love our dynamic. We do really hard and intense work, and I just don't want that awkward tension to be there that I've felt really intensely the last couple of sessions that has made it really uncomfortable for me. So if we can agree upon that, then we're good, and we'll talk about this in the work session. Over to you, Todd. I feel like
Thanks.
I
just want to say I'm really sorry that you felt that way.
Okay, really, thank you.
Thanks.
How are you, Todd?
No, great, no,
Like the
that was great.
news anchor.
And I would,
Over to you.
in other news,
In other news, Todd.
what I was gonna also suggest is that if you do put something in writing and we put it in the agenda packet for the commission to consider, I would recommend it being like something that you either make as a resolution or as an addition to your rules and procedures so that it carries forward for the future commission. Because I think that's a great place to house those things, like we did with Martha's rules. And by the way, the Martha's rules, because it's complicated, we talked a lot about
Yes,
that.
we did.
Is like, what are the like, how do you distill this down into an actual procedure? We're also gonna just keep them on the next page after the agenda and every agenda packet. So when we forget, like, what is that one step that we do? We can just look at it really quickly. I'm gonna try to be brief on my updates. Although I do have a little bit of a list of things I was gonna bring up. And Victoria, I also wanna make sure you have some time. Would you like to start just talking about outreach things, and then I can jump into what I have?
Oh, sure.
Okay.
So, I like briefly forgot what month it was. 2 Fridays ago, we had our open house, and that was really cool. A lot of cool people came out from our service partner community. Courtney already left, but Home to Hope and the OEI team also got to meet a lot of, like, they brought along their kind of content providers and ours as well. Just kind of like, it was a very good time. Huno came out. Anyway, not to do like a who's who of the people that we interact with, but it was really
Our
really
mediator,
cool.
yeah.
He's our mediator. He came down from Arlington. It was pretty cool. Yeah, he was
We
amazing.
got to hear his life story.
Wolfgang showed up also as well, which was very cool. So that went well. Thank you all for letting me announce that last meeting. The update from that is that it went well. Another thing that the open house gave us the opportunity for was to show off the video that we've been, I think, talking about for so long. It's complete. It's on Facebook.
I was trying to find it.
It was posted on the 7th or the 8th. It made
On
it up
Facebook? Only on Facebook?
on Facebook for the
I saw
city.
on Twitter it wasn't there.
It's
So
supposed to be-
at least I didn't see it. It was like the main city
Yeah.
website. I mean the main city Twitter account. It
I don't-
wasn't there.
I don't
At
think
least
it's on
didn't see
yet.
it. Did you see it? I didn't see it either.
I didn't see it either.
Okay, but it is on Facebook.
It is definitely on
wanted to share.
Facebook.
Okay.
Confirmedly as of this afternoon, it's on our Facebook. It should soon be on our website from the human rights end. And I'm working with our communications department to see where else we can get it on, hopefully on other social media forums as well. So that's another thing that has been a cool achievement for our office in this past month. The agenda packet this time, I know that for a long time we've also been talking about having a calendar of outreach events for tabling purposes. There's a lot of really fun ones. It's the time of year where we have Civil Sabroso coming up for our Spanish speaking. It's the Latin American Cultural Heritage Festival. Chihamba is coming up. That's African Dance Cultural Festival. So is Pride. So these are all events that we'll be tabling at. If anybody would like to show up, I would love to have you guys. I'd love to talk about the commission when we're doing tabling. It's usually something that the community likes to hear about. So if anybody wants to show up, that's the agenda packet. I will now be regularly including that kind of calendar with crossed off dates on it for upcoming dates. So right now it runs till the end of October. Just so you can peruse it at your own time and see if there's anything there that stands out to you, or if you want more information. I would very much so love your company. I know Jeanette's made it out to a couple. Ernest, I think I have seen at a couple as well. So if there's anything on there that catches your eye, I would love to invite you to the table. Super specifically, also Todd and I will be gone on August 5th, that weekend. I'm at a wedding in Chicago, and Todd is also out of town. So our office will be probably like tabling, let's see, having somebody table kind of in place of us that August 4th, that Saturday, August 4th, I think it is.
This is 5th.
It's the 5th. You're totally right.
So you need someone for the table? at
Yes,
West Haven?
if anybody wants, it will be West Haven Day, which will be, it's always a super fun event. It happens at West Haven, it takes up the whole community. It usually starts in the morning and ends somewhere in the early afternoon, although it goes on for
For a long time,
It's really cool. If you stay late, you can catch. I know last year we had. I forget what the name of the organization is, but it's like a step team did a really cool presentation. Prolific ran through. So, if anybody wants more information, that's something that we'd be looking for. If anybody wants to stand in on, if not, I will just ask another community partner to carry our literature. So, no pressure. So that's my pitch for that. I think that's it for updates for our office, unless anybody has outreach questions.
Yeah, can you send more information about West Haven Day?
Sure.
Yeah, just like the times and stuff that need to be tabled. Thank you for that.
Absolutely.
And I seen a post on Facebook, but it's saying trouble with video playing, so.
No.
Do you have like
A digital copy?
I'm sure it's a huge file, but like a.
It's actually not. She zipped it. So
Oh.
it's a very
Zipped
easy
it.
thing. If you all would like to see it, I
Yeah.
would love to
Awesome.
show it off.
Yeah,
'cause
yeah.
Please.
Great.
She did a cool job.
Yeah.
I can send that out.
Do you have permission to share it on our own?
Sure.
We
Think
tried
so.
to tackle that before.
It's ours to share. Yeah. Yeah.
It was an issue.
Yeah.
If you all like it, if you have any other feedback also, I think when we started to talk to this animator, she's based out of Richmond. She's very cool, and we had talked to her a little bit about having like multiple, and I know this is something also that I think built on a previous discussion from before when I started, but about having maybe like more than one video. So if you all are looking at it and this sounds like this is the right tone and temperature for the kind of stuff that we are doing, please let us know what your thoughts are about it. Oh, sorry, and I have one other thing, and this is like also very experimental. It's kind of just to see if this is something that you all would like to collaborate on. But I had thought a little bit about having, for instance, Captain Von Meter join us tonight. I don't know if it would be useful to try and offer to like schedule time to speak with any commissioners about information that you all would want. I don't mean to add more things to anybody's schedule. It's more just to like see if, because Todd and I have the great benefit to like pretty regularly be interacting with other service providers and with community members. And you all also in your outside work have these connections as well, but just to see if there's any way that, you know, something that you're working on, you want to talk to like a service provider about it, or this you're doing research and you think like whatever, and it could help that I offered to set it up on my time during the office, where it is my 9 to 5 to be talking to people, and you know, I was thinking to kind of offer having like hours each month to maybe either talk to you directly or just be available if maybe you wanted to talk to me and say, hey, I would at the next commission meeting, I would actually really like somebody to come and talk to this group, or could you like privately like set up like a one-on-one between like maybe like Wolfgang is like, Victoria, I want to hear from somebody in like this capacity. Can you set that up? Like, I'm happy to do that kind of thing to inform your work also, if that takes your leg off. It is something that I regularly do either way for outreach. So that's just to kind of put that out there. If anybody would like to discuss it further, it doesn't, no hard commitments. I'm not like every third Tuesday. I will be seeing you, but something like that. I kind of thought maybe that might help inform your research as we enter kind of that whatever period.
I like that.
Yes.
Is there a plan to have the new ADA coordinator come talk to us? It would be great to meet that person.
We can email Paul very easily, talk to him and invite him. Mm-hmm.
Catherine, actually, something, also I didn't put this in the outreach thing because it happened yesterday,
Mm.
but part of my role will now include working on, or at least helping
Mm-hmm.
Paul Rudisil, the ADA coordinator, do outreach on the ADA stuff. I think it would be great if you guys met him. He's so experienced in this role
Mm-hmm.
in general and very passionate about it, and I'm sure he would love to speak to you as a commission.
Well, I mean, I don't set the agenda, but
Yeah,
it would be a nice thing.
I'm happy to consider that.
Yeah, I do. I kind of
You checked like 7 times in the past 60 seconds.
Jessica's doing like the neck turn.
I appreciate it.
Thank you, Victoria. That sounds really good.
So I'll be brief because we're already at 8:30, and I know you still have a work session to try to complete. So very briefly, note in the new report, we've added an individual, number of individuals served, unique individuals served number. If you remember, during the annual report, that was a request of council. It took some creative formula making, but we've actually made it a pretty accurate count. Note that it is a little rough because sometimes our contacts are anonymous, and so have a hard time distinguishing, but it's pretty darn close, I think, in terms of a number of how many people were served. So the other thing I was going to say, maybe just to add to what Victoria was offering in terms of connections, we're at a kind of a crux point in the year, right? So we're what is it, July? You have your legislative recommendations to council in September. I think we're going to talk a little bit about that in the work session. And then maybe some final general recommendations to council by October, kind of over the course of your work on housing this year, right? So I want to kind of get you to think about that because as Victoria was talking about, you maybe want to use your meeting times to be inviting the experts out there who can answer the questions that you have. So there's a couple of things for you to think about. Is like, what questions do you have with regard to the issues you're working on? And then let's talk about who can answer those questions for you so you can get the information you need to create a quality product at the end of the year, right? And also ask yourself, what is the product we're trying to create? You know, is it a letter? Is it a recommendation? What is it that you want to produce at the, in October or sometime later this year, aside from your legislative recommendations that shows we put time into addressing housing concerns in Charlottesville, and this is what we've come up with as our work product. So that's all I would say. Use us as resources. Ask us like, hey, we really want to pull in somebody. We can do that. We can make that happen because that's what we're here for. So that's it for my update. Yeah. Oh yeah, and I will be gone at the next work session. So Victoria and I will have to kind of figure out a way to make sure that this meeting gets facilitated. But we've done that before, virtually. It'll be the first time in person that we've had to do that.
So you guys will not be here.
On the 3rd. It's fine. Ernest.
So you will not be here August 3rd.
I will not be here August 3rd, me personally. So, yeah. And I won't be able to join virtually. I will be far with my family in a place where I probably don't have electronics. So,
Good for you.
yeah. Thanks. And that's it for me.
And Victoria, you also be gone?
I shouldn't be.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
She's on the weekend.
I don't think it's a,
That's
that's, no, I think date-wise, in terms of what you've got going on, as far as you told me, I don't think you're gonna be on that week, right? Yeah, cool.
Okay, we have much to get to.
Just that weekend, just the weekend,
Yeah.
yeah.
Sure, go. Okay.
Yep.
Good. Go on vacation time. I'm sure.
Yeah, couple of weeks.
Good, I'm glad you're going on vacation. Thank y'all for all the support you do, and thank you for getting that report out to city council, and the correction, of that document.
Oh, yeah,
Thank
yeah,
you.
sure.
When I
Yeah,
tried to click on it, I was like, it's not loading.
it's a very weird tech problem with OneDrive, but yeah, we got it.
Okay, all right, so we do have to work to our work session today, where we were wanting to, first, sorry, I'm going immediately into the work session, sorry. Are there any reports out from commissioners, that have visited the set liaison groups? Are there any updates?
I attended Charlottesville DSA last night. Great folks. I'll keep it quick because we got limited time. Their future of anti-eviction work is sort of pivoting from being able to connect people with funds that exist to help cover rent, to realizing there are no funds to help cover rent, to try to switch strategy to figure out how to help tenants who are facing eviction because there are no longer really any options left. So that is a process that they are currently facing, which is grim. In maybe more positive news, Virginia Equity Center developed a really great tool to visualize the landlords with by count of eviction. So it's interactive, you can see it over time, and it's going to your inbox right now. Over.
Interesting.
Okay.
Yeah.
DSA?
Yeah, Democratic Socialists.
Yes.
I was just gonna say Democratic Socialists of America for the acronym. Also, that catalog, sorry, it's called the Evictors Catalog. It's
Yeah.
very cool. If you type in RVA Eviction Labs Evictors Catalog, so cool.
Are there any actions that you feel we should be taking? I mean, I know it's information.
Yeah, so one thing that they are looking to do is organizing around tenants' rights and trying to organize several different Know Your Rights sessions at 3 different housing complexes across Charlottesville. They're currently planning on doing these tenant workshops on site, which I think is probably best, but I also thought maybe there's an opportunity for like HRC to provide space and have like a broader community forum. I did not ask them about that in the meeting last night, but if there's any willingness or enthusiasm to partner with them, I could make that inroad.
That'd be nice. That'd be nice to do that.
Is there anyone else have updates?
Just thank you for signing this coalition letter.
Oh, welcome, it's great. Thanks for being on me about it.
I was just out of the country and like
No, I
trying to
appreciate it.
manage everything.
And then I was like traveling at the same time, and then it's like, so thank you for that. So the next, action that we have is we confirmed work session, so just for those that are taking notes, we didn't skip over that, just before, we did approve that we'll have a work session on August 3rd. So now we're going into legislative recommendation, to council. I'm sorry, I'm doing something that I say I find annoying by. I just wanna go back real quick to what we're talking about with, housing and our liaison. Hopefully in our work session, I'd love to, I know we've discussed commissioners going and visiting groups. Some groups are meeting, some are not. We're able to attend, we're not able to attend. That maybe in that work session, we can talk a little bit more about strategy to what Todd's point was, is like, what do we think we can produce by the end of the year related to our goal of housing? So just, I guess, to be more talked about, but I wanna make sure that I said that before I forgot. Okay, so sorry, going back to new business, the legislative agenda recommendation, Todd has so kindly suggested that we should, put together an expert panel to bring up legislative potential recommendations, and he's provided us with a list that actually Lindell had started about the community engagement, like partners potentially. So we'll stop talking and just hear your guys' thoughts about how we want to go about creating legislative recommendations and who we want to invite to our expert panel.
And sorry, would this expert panel be, I
I'm terrible at this.
It's fine.
Would the expert panel be for us?
Yes.
Okay, yes, thank you.
Sorry, Wolfgang.
To be honest, I have not given this idea the time or attention it deserves, and I unfortunately have really no recommendations. I'm sorry for that.
Yes, go.
Just maybe a way to think about this. So you drafted a resolution, A23-1, that stipulates what you valued as your priorities around housing advocacy this year, right? So taking a look at what you put as your primary focuses, can you think of legislative questions that you might have around those focuses? And then whom might we invite to speak on those particular points to give you some insight as to what may be being considered at the General Assembly level and or what you might want to recommend that council lift to the General Assembly around those issues. That may be one way to think about this, and then take a look at the list and or brainstorm other people that you think might be able to bring something to the table, and then we can invite them.
Yes, Catherine.
One, I think I'm already on the record as saying maybe we don't need to have legislative recommendations, we could just not do it. But if we do want to do it, I think what Todd's saying makes sense. I would want to ask CLIC and LAJC, FAR, like what their priorities are, right? Because I don't think there's any point in us recommending things if there's not already a group working on it.
And they were gonna have their own
Your
legislation.
mic, sorry. Okay, sorry.
I'll just say, I agree.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Yes, Lindell?
So, again, rather than us having our own recommendations, what if we do look at those who are planning to do the same thing and look at their recommendations and then just say us too, right?
I'm not opposed to that, so who's the whom? Who are the people that we want to reach out to gather their legislative recommendations?
All the organizations we're currently liaising with. I mean, I'm happy to reach out to DSA. They've got a great network, very politically engaged, among others. Not just DSA. Be very, not very representative, I suppose.
Clarifying question, when you say reach out, are you going to invite them to your next meeting so that they can speak to you about what their priorities are and so that the public can also hear that conversation? Or are you going to reach out by email? That's one question that I had. Second clarifying question, would it also be helpful to maybe request a member of council who's working on the legislative priorities for council this year to come to your meeting and hear that and or tell you what they're working on?
I was just gonna send an email.
Okay.
But seems like there's an opportunity that we could capitalize on.
Yes, Victoria.
Just, thank you. I just wanted to say, if we have a commissioner come and speak, Michael Payne used to be on DSA. Is one of the person who I think founded it, and has a long history of working in affordable housing. Well, he's like a very young person, but but used to work at Habitat for Humanity and like has put all over his like campaign sort of plans and in his development affordable housing stuff. So if we had to liaise with somebody specifically about our housing kind of research project, maybe it would be good to connect with him.
So this may make my job real easy. So, so what I'm hearing potentially, I do like the idea of what Todd was saying. I was pausing to think. I still would like to have the expert panel come, inviting them to our meeting and then hearing the recommendations again, so that the public can also hear it, and inviting Councilor Payne, if he's still the appropriate person to invite to come, and then the others that we've wanted to partner with to see if they would like to come to our next meeting to have this discussion. Kind of what I'm hearing. So are we just saying everyone on the list that we currently have? Were we able to make contact with every person on that list? I understand that we weren't.
know that we were. I think there were still some that were outstanding.
I don't know if I got the, Catherine, again, the name of the person that you've also worked with. He's really interested in bikes and.
I
He's
know
in
so
Bryansbury.
many.
I know, I'm trying to think of all the clues. He's in Fifeville.
So that doesn't narrow it down that much. I think you might be talking about Matt Gilligan, Josh, Carp, Josh Cron.
Josh something.
So
I'll find it.
Comma
the
bike.
list that I currently have are the Charlottesville Public Housing Association, PHAR, the Charlottesville Low Income Housing Coalition, which you just mentioned, Livable CVO, I've lost how many people that is now. The CHRA Board, Charlottesville Planning Commission, Fifeville Neighborhood Association, the DSA, and the Piedmont Housing Alliance.
I did meet with Steve Johnson.
So then I can draft an email or message to them just saying, we'd like to have, saying our goals for this year related to housing. We would like to put, we'd like to hear from them, about their legislative priorities for this year in a panel discussion.
If they have any, because I can tell you
If they have
Livable Seville doesn't really have legislative priorities.
Okay. Is that reasonable, Todd?
Seems like a great way.
I always
What-
look to you for assurance.
What
like,
support do you need to make that happen?
helping me draft that letter and
Okay.
making sure subsequent documents are available for them.
Want to circulate a
Yeah.
little letter? Okay,
Yeah.
sounds
Is that
good.
possible? Yeah. And then if you guys, if you could, thank you, Catherine, I know you're the one that kind of put this together. I know some of you guys have made contact with these organizations. I can't find where that document is, where emails are, but if you
It's
have.
OneDrive. Why can't you find it?
Why can't I find it? I took it off of OneDrive.
You just did.
But if someone could repoint me to wherever that is with the email contacts, that'd be helpful. I think I have it. I think this is this document. but-
Should we add LHAC to that list? I'm just worried that a lot of organizations by July wouldn't have like written legislative priorities, but I would imagine like a larger organization like LHAC or Home, Housing Opportunities Made Equal, like that, I don't know if they might, but I think we should invite them. I'm
Yeah.
not disagreeing,
Can
I'm
you
just
send me an email so I can make sure that's on the list?
just add those?
Yes,
Yeah.
please.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Yes.
So just logistically, would we be, there we go. Logistically, would we be inviting them to come in person? Would
Or
be the,
Zoom, however
or Zoom.
comfortable, Right.
Either way.
Yeah.
Okay. And then we would give them, what, 5 minutes each to present? I'm just thinking about the numbers of people, and it could become a 4-hour meeting. So I was just trying, no, like, and what we would, Jessica, to your, like, what we would be asking from them, like 5 minutes to present or 5 to 10 minutes to present your legislative agenda, and then everybody does that, and then we ask questions, or are there other prompts that we would want to give them as well? I think I'm asking this, yeah.
Oh, yeah, I appreciate the logistical question. I think we would ask them to join however they feel comfortable, so being here in person or via Zoom, and we would ask them to present, 5 to 10 minutes. It seems like a short period of time. And if, I would imagine in advance to the meeting, they can provide whatever they
Yeah.
have, so that would help prepare us. I know it helps me, like, do due diligence prior to stepping into the meeting, and then having a discussion. When we've had community partners come before, it's been a very fruitful conversation. We did have direct questions to ask them, and I would do my best to moderate this so we can move it forward. I think all the logistics to be determined. I don't want to
Yeah.
have you bind me to, like I said, 10:15 and went over. But yes, some nature of them presenting to us doing some Q&A, in finalizing, in asking them also of what ways we can support them, iterating to them, again, our mission that we have with the Human Rights Commission, and then especially, it'd be great to have, sorry, I feel like I'm rambling. Counselor, thank you. Counselor Payne be here to hear it, and then asking them specifically what we can do to use our voice on the commission, because I know we've said that a lot, that we want to use our voice in effective ways to support them. And so hopefully from the end of the meeting, I would find it to be successful if we can have a list to say, we're going to support CHRA, this is their specific recommendation, and just have it all in one letter, that we are supporting what they're going to be presenting to them. I think is what my understanding is.
Yep.
Does that sound accurate?
Mhm.
Any further follow-up questions?
The only reason I asked about logistics is more so they know how long they're gonna be expected to spend time with us, so that they are able to be fully engaged for, if we think it's a couple hours, we want them here, because we might have some questions for it, so that was part of it too. I won't hold you to the 10 or 15 minutes.
Okay, good. But we'd have them in the beginning of the meeting, just like we had.
No,
the
I loved it
captain.
tonight.
So does it sound?
Is this for August 3rd or for the August, the next meeting?
Next regular meeting, which is, what date is that? 17th?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Concerns, Tom?
No, I think we have a plan. I think it sounds like you and I will maybe
Okay,
work on a
yeah.
draft of a letter.
Yeah.
Why don't we finalize a list of people
Yes.
to invite, and I can, we can take a look at that spreadsheet. It hasn't probably been updated in a while, so some of the people on there may have changed, right? I think you may have said that. So maybe we can do a little work on that. So you and I touch base after
Yep.
the meeting, schedule some time to do
Yes,
that.
sounds good.
Okay.
Okay, well, I'll make that easy. All right, any thoughts on this before we move to public comment? No. They already got here. So, Remy, do we have any public any members of the public?
No attendees at this time.
Awesome. All right, so any commissioner updates? Yes.
Appreciate you all. That's it.
That's usually me.
But especially you two.
I know, I
mean,
appreciate you doing
Yeah,
that.
this is this is real bumpy work. And
Yes.
so I appreciate you guiding us through it.
Make me cry. I've been holding it in all the time. All right, so next steps. My favorite part of the meeting. Summarizing everything. So thank y'all for powering through today. I think it was great. I know he's not here, but really appreciate Captain Mark for coming to speak with us. I will be no, I'm not drafting an email. This collective over here will be drafting an email that I can send to, so it's not very specific, Mary, Catherine, Lindell, and Wolfgang have volunteered to just draft very clear language of what we want to follow up with the captain with, and we will send that out. As soon as that gets drafted, I'll send that out to him, letting him know that we will be meeting for a special work session on August 3rd to discuss what we'd like to recommend to council as far related to the what's the word?
The expansion.
The expansion.
Yeah.
Thank you, of the Salvation Army. Todd and I will work on sending a letter to our community partners to invite them to come to our next regular meeting to discuss legislative agenda recommendations that they may have. And Victoria is gonna send us the video that they've worked on.
And details on West Haven.
And details on West Haven.
And then, whatever, stating of if anybody wants to meet with me, kind of thing.
Oh, yes.
But that's.
Appreciate that. Did I miss anything? Thanks. Okay, if that's all is clear, we will be adjourning at 8:56 p.m. Ooh.
Yeah.
That was intense. Whew.